This is 11 WTTW Chicago.
I'm Alton Miller, the Mayor's press secretary, and it's my sad responsibility to let you know that Mayor Washington was pronounced dead this afternoon at 1:36.
Good evening. Mayor Harold Washington is dead. The man who was once thought to be finished politically, but who came back to become the first black mayor of Chicago, is dead at the age of 65. He was stricken shortly after 11 o'clock this morning, and for the next hour we will present the story of this tragic day in Chicago and look back at the life and times of Harold Washington. We begin with political correspondent Bruce Dumont.
By noon, a crowd had assembled outside Northwestern Memorial Hospital on East Superior Street. Word had spread that Mayor Harold Washington had suffered a heart attack in his City Hall office and that paramedics had rushed him to the hospital for emergency treatment. Press Secretary Alton Miller, who had been speaking to the mayor when he collapsed, offered periodic reports to a throng of reporters.
I'm not going to try to answer the medical questions. We'll have somebody come out.
Al, he is alive.
Yes, he is.
As reporters waited, city officials and old friends arrived to check on the fallen mayor. The scene was reminiscent of one nearly 11 years ago when Mayor Richard J. Daley was taken to the same hospital after suffering a massive heart attack in his doctor's office. While official word on the mayor's condition was pending at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, the mayor's fifth-floor City Hall office was surrounded by more reporters as city workers and senior staff personnel went to the mayor's inner office to await word from hospital officials. Live television reports kept the city updated, and at 1:20, rumors of the mayor's death spread throughout the hall. An hour later, it was official.
I'm Alton Miller, the Mayor's press secretary, and it's my sad responsibility to let you know that Mayor Washington was pronounced dead this afternoon at 1:36.
Following the announcement by Alton Miller, the hospital's chief of staff explained that the mayor never regained consciousness after his collapse at 11:01 a.m.
He was placed upon an advanced form of heart-lung machine which can be applied very quickly, and with that we were able to accomplish essentially normal circulatory dynamics within about 15 minutes of his arrival. Unfortunately, the mayor sustained irreversible brain damage. We could not get any signs of neurologic recovery nor spontaneous cardiac activity, and he was pronounced dead at 1:36 this afternoon.
The mayor's chief of staff, Ernest Bearfield, discussed the city's immediate future.
The normal operations of government will continue. Tomorrow is a holiday. Friday is a work day. We will have people at work doing what has got to be done, and there are some key decisions that still have to be made by government through the end of the year.
The city's interim mayor, Alderman David Orr of the 49th Ward, was next to speak.
This city has lost a very good friend and a great mayor. We are asking everybody in the city to pull together in this very difficult time.
Finance Committee Chairman Alderman Timothy Evans of the 4th Ward told reporters he had been with the mayor earlier in the day at a South Side appearance.
I'd like to assure the citizens of this city that the mayor was in rare form earlier today. I believe that he would expect of us to make this a smooth transition, to make certain that we not act precipitously, that we be prepared to do what is best for all the citizens of this city.
As the press conference broke, mourners at City Hall filed into the mayor's office to share their grief, as Chicagoans paused to offer their reflections.
Well, I was shocked, and I'm very sorry to hear it. I think the city has a great loss.
A lot of people are going to really miss him. A lot of people are going to really miss Harold Washington. So we hope we get another good mayor in that can do a wonderful, good job like Harold Washington did.
I think he was a great man, and I think that he did a lot of wonderful things for Chicago.
Sad.
And it's very, very sad.
As the day ended, the black and purple bunting had been draped on the front door at City Hall. The city's first black mayor was dead, 4.5 years after writing Chicago history. At age 65, few felt Harold Washington would really last 20 years as he often promised. But few felt his stay would be so brief. For Chicago Tonight, this is Bruce Dumont.
And joining us now are Charles Hayes, U.S. Congressman from the Illinois 1st District in Chicago, Lou Palmer, Chairman of Chicago Black United Communities and noted commentator, Dr. Bruce Brundage, Chief of Cardiology at the University of Illinois Hospital, and Bruce Dumont, our political correspondent, is at our downtown offices, and he'll have several guests during this next hour of Chicago Tonight. And Congressman Hayes, I wonder if you could tell us what Harold Washington meant to you personally and what you think he meant to this city, this community.
Well, Mayor Washington was a friend who I met in the early 60s when he first ran for political office to this General Assembly down in Springfield. And he was the greatest leader, and I've been in Chicago ever since 1942, and that I've ever seen as the chief executive of the city of Chicago, and I think in the whole country.
What made him so special to you?
Well, because of his fairness and his interest and concern about being the voice for those who are voiceless because of the economic status and their race or their sex. He was a political leader that represented a total community, you know. And when he became mayor, I always said he was a right person at the right time for this city of ours. And I think it's been proven. I was shocked in my office when my receptionist at south side of Chicago, 780 Cottage Grove, ran in my office to tell me that the mayor had just had been taken out of his office. We turned the radio on to get updated situation, and I rushed out after we had prayer, and the people, the staff who was in my office, and to go to the hospital just to get a first-hand report. But Chicago has lost, not just me, but Chicago has lost. I think America has lost a great leader,
Lou Palmer, how long have you known Harold Washington?
Oh, it must be 20 to 25 years.
And tell us about your sense of personal loss, and for this community, what your evaluation of this man's life was.
Well, Harold Washington was an extraordinary man. I met him early on in his political career. And he and my wife worked together, my wife Georgia, considerably on legislative matters. He was probably one of the greatest legislators that we have ever had. And I think this got a little bit in the way when Seabuck began a process of electing the first black mayor, because when Harold was...
You mean the Chicago Black United Communities?
Chicago Black United Communities, of which I am the chairman. We went through a survey and a plebiscite, and Harold obviously was the choice of our community. And it took a little doing to get him to run, because my feeling is that he was just very comfortable as a legislator.
And he was good at it, wasn't he?
And he was exceedingly good as a legislator.
Now, when you say it took a little doing, that, for anybody that wants to write the novel or the film of his life, is the understatement of the year, because it took a lot of doing.
You're right.
There was a great deal of animosity, was there not, and anger between the two of you who were dear friends? I mean, this wasn't a pretty easy moment in your lives, was it?
Well, little doing is an understatement. We simply had to show Harold Washington that he had been chosen by the community for an extraordinary job, and that he had to follow through on the community's choice. He told us we had to register so many voters, 50,000, he said, and so we registered 150,000, a great coalition of people. He said that we had to just show him that we could get our people out to vote. And I guess it was the next November, I think it was a gubernatorial, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. When our people just flocked to the polls and almost defeated Thompson. And I always said that they were coming out to show Harold Washington that they would vote.
Yeah, I know you're absolutely correct, Lou, and the difficulties in convincing him to run.
Absolutely.
It was not easy.
Yes, he said at one time, he whispered to somebody in a meeting, it's not the man, it's the plan. He believed in the movement, he just didn't think that he was the man.
He came into my office, I was a leader of my union at that time, and talked to James Wright, who was then the leader of United Automobile Workers. You had been talking to him, so that other people had been talking to him about running. And he still was not convinced that he wanted to make that step. He says, I'm satisfied with what I'm doing. I said, but you know, Harold, he wanted to know how much support that we thought he could get from labor. We assured him that we'd work like the devil to get labor support for him. But he said, I'm satisfied in Congress. He was a member of the Education and Labor and the Judiciary Committee there, and he had built a good record down in Springfield when he was in the General Assembly. And he said, I got a safe seat, you know, and that's where he put it.
And you were trying, you people are trying to put him in the hot seat.
That's right.
Well, he told a group of us in my basement that he was not going to run.
That's right.
And this was after it had become almost certain that he was going to run, and it looked like we were going to not have a candidate for our people. And we had to, again, do some more
Was there one moment that finally turned him around?
I think so.
And it was briefly?
Well, I am told by him, I was told by him, that he announced on November 10th, 1982, the midnight before that Wednesday, he was told by a very prominent black politician that this other politician absolutely would not run. So Harold was left out there. And he had no choice. He was too far out on the limb. He could not have refused to run. Do you think, John?
I don't think he could have. You had a person like the late Bill Barrett, too, who we had for several years, you know, been trying
Edwin
to find.
C. Bill Barrett,
right. Who
head of the Urban League.
Head of the Urban League, who had headed a committee, a search committee, to find a person who we figured was capable of becoming mayor, who happened to be black, you know, and Harold was that person.
I want to go to Bruce Dumont, who's at our downtown offices. And Bruce, you spent much of the day at City Hall. Tell us about the mood there, and tell us, there was a long period, was there not? He was taken to Northwestern Memorial Hospital, but it was after 2 o'clock that his death was announced. But I assume that you were hearing reports of his death before that.
Yes, John. When I arrived at City Hall, which was shortly after noon today, I had spent some time outside the mayor's office on the 5th floor talking with reporters. And at times like this, everyone is sharing information as soon as they learn it. I had an opportunity to go down to the 2nd floor, which is where most of the aldermanic offices are, and talked with a number of the aldermen for about an hour and 15 minutes. It was at 1:20, and I will never forget it, because the moment I heard those words that he's dead, and I heard those words from Alderman Ed Smith, the alderman and committeeman of the 28th Ward, I looked at the clock. It was right over Alderman Smith's shoulder, and it was 1:20 on the dot. He had received word from a fire department source that the mayor was indeed dead, and they were preparing the official announcement, which came almost exactly 1 hour later at 2:20. The mayor, of course, had been officially pronounced dead at 1:36, but the official announcement, which you heard early in the program, was made by Al Miller at 2:20. And there was a feeling of loss. At a time like this, there are the friends and the foes are obviously considering the loss of an individual, but they're also looking ahead to the political ramifications of the loss of a great leader. And I would just like to add, if I might, John, my personal reflection to the comments made by Congressman Hayes and Lou Palmer. That day, November 10th of 1982, in my view, is one of the most electric moments in my life. And that was the day at the Hyde Park Hilton where the man, the movement, and the moment all came together in this electrifying moment when Harold Washington decided to step forward and accept the challenge that your guests back there have talked about. And one person who I spoke with at the end of that historic day was one of his closest friends in the world, a man by the name of Sam Patch, who was his longtime legislative aide. and who has subsequently gone on to work with him at City Hall. And I recall after that having conversations with Sam Patch about the historic moment that we all had just witnessed. And Sam had been a long-time friend of mine as well. And today, when the news was officially announced, the first person who walked outside of the 5th floor was Sam Patch. And so at the beginning of Harold Washington's rise to power in the city of Chicago, and at the very end, Sam Patch was at the beginning, at the end of that chapter of Chicago politics that I personally will never forget.
Thank you, Bruce. And I want to go back, we'll stretch this segment just a little bit, because before you go, Congressman Hayes, you've talked about the beginnings and about the man. Now talk about his legacy as mayor of the city of Chicago. He became the mayor, he was re-elected the mayor. What's his legacy?
His legacy is to make, he loved Chicago, to make it the kind of city that, and head the kind of government that was going to be beneficial to particularly those who have not. I think he left that kind of legacy. I think he put us on the kind of track that we certainly got to continue. To do anything different from that, I think, would be a betrayal to the kind of path that he cut for us. We need to. I know there's a lot of unfinished business to be done. I'm not a member of the council, but I think those of us who have worked with him and know what he stood for, this was an intense man. One who, even on planes, I've been on planes with him when we went to the Super Bowl down in New Orleans. He read a book almost from Chicago to New Orleans. He was that kind of a person, and I think we need to do what we can to make sure that the kind of life he lived, the kind of track record he built for us is not lost. We got to continue it, and I hope that that the City Council understands that.
And Lou Palmer, briefly, what do you think his legacy as mayor is?
Well, certainly one of his greatest legacy is the hope that he gave to our people, particularly our young people. All day today, as I've been moving from one place to the other, youngsters would stop me and say, "You hear about Harold?" Mm-hmm. And there was just so much sadness in their voice. So Harold Washington showed how young people, that the world really is open to them.
And by the way, you talk about Harold. Harold had become Harold, hadn't it?
Yes,
he was known throughout this nation and now throughout the world.
Nobody called him Mayor Washington. They called him Harold, because that was the kind of person that he was. So our youngsters will never forget Harold Washington.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. There was a heroic effort by doctors and paramedics to save Harold Washington, and we'll be back with a leading cardiologist's comments after this interview Bruce Dumont recorded today with former mayoral aide William Walls III, who talked about the mayor's physical condition.
We talked about health, but only when the people around Harold Washington would initiate the conversation. He wasn't very much concerned about his health. He didn't have regular doctor's appointments, didn't have regular physical checkups. He was a very confident person, confident in his health situation. He believed that he got good exercise just by working on a day-to-day basis, working long, strenuous hours, and outperforming even his young staff.
And Dr. Bruce Brundage, who's chief of cardiology at the University of Illinois Hospital, is with us. And Dr. Brundage, there have been reports all day, of course, about the medical care. Now, from what you have heard and what you have seen on television, was he given the best possible care, you think, under the circumstances?
From everything I've seen, he was given more than the best possible care. It appears that CPR, an attempt to reestablish adequate blood flow, was begun almost immediately in his office, either by his security people or by others there who knew how to do what we call basic life support.
And what is that process? What actually happens?
Two things happen. One is to breathe for the individual by mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and the second is to compress the chest so that the squeezing action causes blood to be ejected from the heart and basically takes over the pumping action of the heart.
And then he's put in an ambulance, and even during that process of going to Northwestern Memorial Hospital, there is activity going on?
I believe so. I heard
all of that's monitored?
Right. The paramedic, the chief paramedic of the city, I think, was actually the one who arrived on the scene next and began what is called advanced cardiac life support. And this involves monitoring, administration of drugs, and electrical attempts at electrical conversion of this abnormal rhythm he developed.
Then he's taken into the emergency room of Northwestern Memorial Hospital, where 3 teams of physicians are present, and he's put on some kind of a heart-lung machine. Now, what is that process?
Well, I'm not certain. I've heard Dr. Sanders now twice today describe what took place, but it is some type of portable heart-lung machine which took over both the pumping action of the heart and the oxygenation of the blood. And it could be instituted in a very short period of time.
And this can go on for hours, can it not? I mean, how do you make a decision on how long to keep trying on that? What's the process?
Well, the 2 basic things were to see if there was any evidence of brain activity, whether there was still life in the brain. And then probably even more telling was that they were unable to get the heart restarted. And we frequently can get the heart restarted, and then we are left with a decision about the brain. But if the heart can't be restarted, that's usually the end of the road.
And there apparently is an autopsy that's been performed, and can an autopsy show you that the person died of almost instantly of a heart attack, or what do you learn from an autopsy?
Well, I think there's quite likely they'll learn what the cause of the sudden collapse, which was presumably the heart stopped beating, and the most likely explanation is a blockage of one of the coronary arteries. And they're likely to find that. Doctor,
you are involved in the CPR Chicago project. Tell us just briefly what that's about.
Well, it's ironic. Mayor Washington's office and the fire department have been very supportive with the American Heart Association, the Chicago Heart Association, in studying how effective these episodes are being managed here in Chicago. And this project's been going on for a year now and will provide, I think, useful information to make us even better at saving people's lives who drop suddenly from heart attacks.
Dr. Brundage, thank you very much. Harold Washington lived the kind of political life that makes for high drama, not only for the man himself, but for his city. And our correspondent, Royal Kennedy, looks back on Harold Washington's battles, triumphs, and personal memories.
You want Harold?
April 12, 1983. In a record voter turnout, Harold Washington was elected as Chicago's first black mayor. For many, his election symbolized the arrival of a new day for politics in Chicago.
I will initiate your reforms, but I charge each and every one of you to rededicate your efforts to heal the divisions that have plagued us. Each of us must reach out in open arms. Together we will overcome our problems and restore Chicago to its proper position as one of the most dynamic cities in all the world.
The next day, a unity luncheon was held in an effort to close the wounds of a campaign marred by racial divisions. But the old divisions persisted. At his inauguration, the mayor's speech was less than conciliatory.
I must tell you what we have inherited. I must tell you about the city's finances. As I said before, I have no good news. The immediate fiscal problem facing Chicago is both enormous and complicated. Our school system is not $100 million short next year, as we believed during the mayoral campaign. But we now find that the income may be $200 million less than the expenditures of that vast bureaucracy. My transition team advises me that the city government is also in far worse financial condition than we thought. To further complicate the matter, in the waning days of the outgoing administration, hundreds of new city jobs were passed out and hundreds of other jobs reassigned.
He called his victory a triumph for reform and predicted the demise of the old machine.
One of the ideals that held us together said that neighborhood involvement has to take the place of the ancient, decrepit, and creaking machine.
But the old machine wasn't ready to let Washington take over the reins of power.
Is this how? Tell him to shut my mic off.
No,
is this what you want to do?
You guys
is this the way we're supposed to come together? Is this the way you want to organize this council? Is this the way you want to organize this city? Is that what you want to do? Yeah, take a look. Shut it off. Tell him again. You're afraid of the truth.
The so-called council wars continued for most of his first term in office, until aldermanic elections in the spring of 1986 shifted the balance of power and gave him control. Harold Washington was a highly complex and paradoxical man, private and public, caring and careless. To some, he was a scoundrel, to others, a savior. But almost everyone agreed he was an exceptional politician. Where did that come from? Washington himself, in a very personal interview with John Calloway in 1977, an interview which Washington said his mother cherished as one of the best he ever gave, explained those early influences that made him what he was.
Was there something in growing up in those years in Chicago in a black neighborhood that created a sense of either animosity or inferiority? I mean, what was your experience as a black young man growing up in this town and dealing with racism?
I was very fortunate because I had a father in the main who could interpret these things for me and who did interpret them for me very finitely. He made it very clear to me that you're growing up in a world which doesn't particularly appreciate you because you're black. You're growing up in a world in which you're going to have to, they think, prove yourself. You're growing up in a world in which if you're not prepared to deal with that world, you're going to suffer very miserably. And even if you prepare yourself, you're not going to get in compensation in return what you put in it. But the least that you should do and must do if you're going to live in this world, and above all make a contribution of significance in this world, you've got to prepare yourself. And that was drummed into me night and day. People ask me very frequently, says, why did you want to be a lawyer? You know, why did you go into public life? You can't really say at a given point in time why you decided to do certain things. All you can do is look back upon your experiences in life and the atmosphere around you, the books you read, the parents you dealt with, the friends you played with, and just say, well, the milieu, the atmosphere, the environment stimulated me to want to do what I'm trying to do.
Did you grow up among books?
Quite a few books, yes. I read them all. I was a Zane Grey fan. I read everything that he wrote. I read the Nick Carter's. I was an omnivorous and Catholic reader.
Did you ever think about being a preacher like your daddy?
Yes, I had to fight to be against it. As a matter of fact, I was moving in that direction, I think, sort of subconsciously. But other influences were impinging upon me. One, for example, not necessarily the most influential, obviously my father was the most, was I got steeped in Clarence Darrow at a very early age. Read his speeches, the Leopold and Loeb trial. At one time I could almost recite everything by heart. I was inspired and encouraged by this man. His attitude on capital punishment, his general humaneness, which radiated from the guy. These are the kind of influences which impinged upon me at an early age.
I think there's a story probably to be written someday or to be chronicled in some way about Roosevelt University after World War II and the very special flavor of that school and the kind of passion that there was. Now, you were caught up in a significant part of this, were you not?
Yes, I was.
Somebody said Roosevelt was very important to you and that you were important to Roosevelt.
It was critical to me. I came out of the Army and hell-bent on completing my education and looked around, and I was encouraged by several people, many close friends, to go to Roosevelt because they were experimenting in, believe it or not at that time, a viable quota system for the admission of blacks.
There's another question, and that is the decision to go into politics, which may not be as independent an operation as going into law. Now, how did that decision come about?
Well, I had always been in it. My father was a precinct captain. He was assistant prosecutor in the city of Chicago. And at the early age of 12, 13, I was passing out literature, and in those days, passing out Christmas baskets to people and picking up literature and doing the statistical work for my dad. And in those days, the Democratic Party in my community was almost a no-no, you know. For example, in that same precinct now, it's about 85 to 90% Democrat. Well, in my young days, it was about 90% Republican. And so my father was fighting uphill all the time. And I got wrapped up in the sort of thing and actually worked precincts off and on until I actually joined the Democratic Party in the city, which was right after I had come out of law school. The decision to enter politics was something I never really debated. I just felt that I belonged in that area. I felt that I could make a contribution through the one area in which I had honed some skills all through my early life, who had further developed those skills in college and law school by being involved in student government, both school-wide, statewide, and nationwide. And so it was just natural for me to enter into organized politics. And the only question was what vehicle you use to do the things you want to do. I chose, at that point, in the early 50s, I chose to work within the Democratic organization.
If we were to have a look at the future, and you were the mayor of the city of Chicago, and a historian were to have written a brief account, an overview of your administration and what you achieved, what would you hope he would write?
He would probably say this: that was a turning point. That was a turning point. Because a man came into office who talked common sense to people, knew the issues and discussed them, galvanized them, that notwithstanding their superficial differences that kept them apart and which other politicians used to keep them apart, he got to the core of the problem. And he searched for the commonality of the problems which cuts across ethnic lines, cuts across black, liberal white, Appalachian white, Latino, and other ethnic base, cuts across those and got to the common core and got that city working for the good of people. And also he was something else. He, by the virtue of the fact that he was elected, was symbolic to other young people who knew his problems, supported him into office, and say, he did it, and therefore I can do it.
In various speeches, Harold Washington expressed his feelings about what he thought he contributed.
In 4 short years, our movement has taken hold. It's deep, has moved from the margins to the mainstream of politics here in Chicago. The language has been changed. The nomenclature has changed. The behavior of the politicians has changed.
And his feelings about how he hoped to be remembered.
I hope someday to be remembered by history as the mayor who cared about people and who was above all fair. A mayor who helped, who really helped to heal our wounds and stood to watch while the city and its people answered the greatest challenge in more than a century, who saw that city renewed.
Remembered in the city he called home. For Chicago Tonight, I'm Royal Kennedy.
And now joining us are Leroy Thomas, who is executive editor of the Chicago Defender, and Sharon Gilliam, who is Mayor Washington's budget director, and Congressman Hayes continues with us in this part of the discussion. And Ms. Gilliam, I wonder if you could tell us, as somebody that worked so closely with him, your thoughts about his contributions to this community.
Well, certainly, I knew the mayor for only the 4.5 years that I worked for him. And having worked for 3 mayors before that in 2 different cities, I saw a very real difference. Certainly, I can appreciate him personally because he was a witty, urbane, warm, and literate man. He was just an interesting person to know. But from my perspective as a budget director, he was someone who understood the governmental process. He understood the numbers, which is important to somebody like me. But he was fair in allocating resources, and I think that that, above all, is coming through in what everybody says about him. When you have billions of dollars to work with and tens of thousands of people providing services, resources can be allocated fairly or something less than fairly. The one thing that he was insistent on at all times when we were designing programs, when we were designing the budget, when we were making decisions about allocation resources, was that it be fair, that everyone in the city, no matter who they were or where they were, whether they supported him or had not supported him, or he had no reasonable expectation that they would ever support him, he still wanted those allocation of resources.
Was he ever encouraged by people to punish his enemies? Did you ever hear him have to say, look, we're going to do this thing the right way, or not do it at all?
One can't help but hear the comments, hey, if they didn't vote for you last time, and they're not going to vote for you next time, and they're never going to vote for you, so who cares? And he would always come back with, but that is not the fair way to do it. They deserve equal city services.
Mr. Thomas, what's your witness to this man's life and times and his contribution?
I think that primarily Mayor Washington is going to be remembered vividly as the first black mayor of Chicago, obviously, but that also we have had to relearn or reestablish our thinking about politics in the city of Chicago. I think that his tenure, as short as it has been, is remarkable in that so many of us, black and white, Hispanic and Asians, never thought it could have happened as soon as it did. There were very few people early on in the black community who expected him to win the election his first time. However, by the second time, we all knew he would. I think that educated this city. One of the remarkable things I remember was, as a member of Jane Byrne's office, when she was near the end of her term.
You were in the press office then?
I was in the mayor's press office as an assistant press secretary. And a man who I have a great deal of respect for, a white gentleman, said, I have no problem with having a black mayor, a black man for mayor if he wins, but who will handle the money? Mayor Washington taught us that he and the budget director know how to handle the money, and they don't have to be elderly white gentlemen.
Ms. Gilliam, let's go back and talk about that, because some said that he never really paid that much attention to his own money, that he was not the kind of man who really cared about building up a fortune. We know all about earlier in his life, he didn't take care of his tax records and so on and so forth. And a lot of people said, terrific politician, but we're worried about him as an administrator. And now you say he was a man who really knew the numbers, who paid attention, and was on the case.
Certainly, and I think there's a vast difference between wanting to build a personal fortune for oneself and being interested in how one's own personal investments are doing, and understanding public policy as it relates to the public dollar.
Do you agree that he didn't care much about his own financial fortunes?
He didn't seem to have any interest in either money or the things money can buy, you know, which to some of us is a little odd.
Congressman Hayes, you're nodding your head. Did you know that side of him?
Well, I just looked at him and observed him. I think that Sharon is absolutely right. I don't think he cared so much about his own personal wealth, amassing any personal wealth. One thing that sticks out in me as his accomplishment that makes him a role model for me and a lot of young people, you know, is I never believed that Harold could open up a city and turn it around as he did. He really opened up this government of ours.
You mean in terms of making records available and making people available?
That's right.
You're talking about access.
And not having it run just for the advantage of what we call the favorite few who'd been around for many, many. And I supported Jane Byrne when she ran. I didn't think she could win, but I supported her. But I just felt that Harold was the kind of political leader that really was not interested in himself. He could have amassed riches. You know, you don't get to be, he could have done that.
Is it true he really loved politics?
I think
he loved that process.
It was in his bones, it was in his system. And
he didn't have to go to work.
He just loved people. He loved people. And I think he proved it. His record proved it.
Mr. Thomas, it's been suggested on this program by Lou Palmer earlier this evening that the mayor was reluctant to run, and that the people in some respects led that movement. Now, as a executive editor of The Defender, which deals with black communities in this town, are the people still there? Is that movement and that fervor and that direction still there in the black communities in this town?
Oh, yes, definitely. It was there throughout Harold Washington's life as our mayor. It has been there even prior to Harold Washington. There have been episodes in the history of Chicago when the power structure, the men in City Hall and in the governor's mansion, wanted, and I won't name names, but so-and-so to stay in power when actually their constituency was basically black. And, well, one name I can mention is Ralph Metcalf. I mean, we have a history in the black community of turning politics into religion, as opposed to the other way around. The Harold Washington juggernaut was a religious experience. At the University of Illinois Pavilion, when at that particular scene when the mayor spoke and the crowd roared, I was lying in bed at home, and I just remember thinking, it's just like being in a Baptist church with 1 million members, and nothing will be able to stop it. I was working for someone else in City Hall, and I knew he was going to win. I lost weight, I lost sleep, I was worried about all the skullduggery that was going on in City Hall. I was doing my best to help him win, and scared every moment until election night that something would happen, that the election would be stolen from him. But those people out there, it's like he was their pastor as well as their mayor. And
so it almost had a religious movement, sort of.
Not almost. It actually is a religious movement, and still is.
Well, that answers my question. You're saying it's still that fervor is there?
His death will do nothing to stop that religious fervor.
Congressman Hayes, before we go, and Ms. Gilliam, we're going to ask you to stay for a little longer, but Congressman Hayes has to go. We're going to be talking, as we continue this special report, about the future. Now, what, in your view, as one of our political leaders in Washington and in Chicago, needs to happen as we go forward in these next few days?
I think we have to, I think Harold would want it this way. We have to continue, I think, those of us in any kind of leadership, or those aspiring for leadership, have to continue the kind of legacy and the kind of a track record that Harold has built. We can't turn around and go back to what used to be in the city of Chicago, where government only operated for those favorite few. We have to have an open city, an open government, one that's concerned and interested in the welfare of people, and not have the situation develop where we lose that kind of interest and concern. And I think that you're going to find that both black, brown, and white, Hispanics, black people, white people who are right-thinking people are going to be ones who give the leadership to continue the path that Harold has followed. That's the way he would want it. That's the way people want it. They want it that way. And those who try to turn it around are going to get some real resistance from people.
Congressman Hayes, thank you very much for being with us, and our thanks also to Roy Thomas of the Chicago Defender. And now we'll go to Bruce Dumont at our downtown offices, who has some guests there.
John, we are joined by Alderman Richard Mell. He is the alderman and the committeeman of the 33rd Ward. And also with us this evening, we have the alderman and committeeman of the 28th Ward, Alderman Ed Smith. I'd like to begin by asking Alderman Mell your reaction to what happened today. And also you were telling us before we went on the air about some observations that you witnessed in the mayor's office prior to or right after he was stricken.
Well, I think, Bruce, anybody that's been in the city of Chicago for 11 years can almost look back and say it was just 11 years reincarnated. I think that we saw, it's almost identical. It was the just before a holiday season. It was a gloomy day. It was around noon, and we got the news that the chief executive of the city of Chicago was stricken, and then the not knowing for a few hours, and then we saw that, in fact, that the chief executive of the city of Chicago had passed away. And I think that the city will come together and work together, but I think it's just almost like waking up 11 years later and seeing the same thing happen. I was there on the 5th floor when the mayor came out of his private office with the paramedics, and we knew then, I think that everybody knew then, that it was very, very serious, and in fact he may have at that time expired. It was a sudden, massive coronary, and I don't think that the paramedics did a fabulous job. They were there immediately. The ambulance was there immediately. They worked on him, and it was just something that unfortunately for the city of Chicago and for the people was just tragic.
Alderman Ed Smith, you are a political leader on Chicago's Great West Side. What is the mood of the West Side this evening?
Well, I think the total mood all over the city, not only in my ward, but all over the city, is gloom, and people are just saddened that this very tragic thing has happened, and people are just completely taken over by it.
Now, politically, John, we should mention that, as has been reported earlier, the Vice Mayor, David Orr of the 49th Ward, is the interim mayor of the city of Chicago. When the City Council meets, however, it will be the City Council that will decide who will be the mayor of the city of Chicago for at least until 1989. According to the consolidated election law in the state of Illinois, municipal elections are to be held in odd number years, and that would mean that although we're looking ahead to a primary in 1988, according to state law, there would not be the decision to replace the mayor at that time. It would not be until February of 1989 for a primary, and February or April of 1989 for a general election. And the names that are emerging as the most likely candidates to emerge as a long-term interim mayor of the city of Chicago. We have Alderman Timothy Evans, who is chairman of the Finance Committee, who is a well-known name because he is a person who has enjoyed considerable media coverage since he took over as the majority leader of the city council. The other name is not too well known to the public, but yet in political circles, he is known as one of the most articulate and most popular members of the city council, and that is Alderman Eugene Sawyer of the 6th Ward. And it is the 6th Ward in the city of Chicago that is the most powerful black ward organization in the city. So the names of Evans and Sawyer are names that have been emerging from one sector of the Chicago City Council, and the other name that is emerging is the gentleman who is with us this evening, and that is Alderman Richard Mell. And Alderman, what conversations have you had today? Has there been any show of support for your possible emergence as the interim mayor?
Well, I think it's early, Bruce, and I think that the city needs to mourn the mayor for a few days before we get into that aspect of the city. I think it'll come about. I think we'll be able to unite behind somebody who can lead the city for this interim area. But I think that there's more important things right now, and I think it's that healing that has to go on after a death. And I remember, for those who were here during Daley's early passing, and the situation was the same. And you're stunned, and the politics that are swirling tonight, because Chicago obviously is a city of politics, has to really take a back seat for right now. And we have to sit back and take a deep breath and say, look, everybody's flattered by this mention, but on the other hand, we have to go on with the council meeting, hopefully Monday, where we'll all meet together and we'll be able to have a service for the mayor, and then go on through the funeral services, and then worry about that when that time comes.
Bruce Dumont, I would like to ask you if there's any dispute. Is there any area of dispute over this process? In other words, when you say that the city council can meet and elect one of its own, and then there could be another, there could be an election in 1989, is that pretty well agreed upon by everybody?
Most of the people that I've spoken with would agree with that. I guess the one question is whether or not the election conceivably could be moved up earlier than 1989, but there's nothing in the law that would suggest that anyone other than the Chicago City Council will determine who the interim mayor of the city of Chicago is. And Alderman Smith, maybe you can offer further comment on that.
Bruce, that is absolutely right. The statute dictates what the policy should be. Right now, the interim mayor is David Orr, and he will run the city council until the council calls a meeting and actually meet and discuss who should take over, who should run the city council, who should serve as mayor. And that is set by statute, and we probably will not tamper with that.
Bruce, we have new guests that we want to introduce here. We're now joined by Michael Bolandic, who is the former mayor of the city of Chicago, who succeeded the late Mayor Richard Daley, and Alderman Roman Paczynski of the 41st Ward. And Alderman Bolandic, would you give us your response to the tragic events of this day?
Well, I certainly join with all of the citizens of our community in mourning the loss of a great mayor. He said of me, I think a year after he was in office, my wife pointed it out to me after she read the morning paper that they asked him to comment on former mayors, and when he mentioned my name, he said that he was an intelligent, civilized, decent human being, and I certainly could say the very same things about Harold Washington.
Do you find him personally, I mean, I knew you were on the opposite sides of political issues, but did you find him a personally likable
We
man?
always had good personal, cordial relations. I would see him every year when he would sound the gun for the start of the marathon, and he always wished me well, and I always finished. And then, of course, he'd tell me that he was going to start training, and he would call me up next week to start jogging. I'm still waiting for the telephone call.
You prodded him a bit on that. I mean, you are a fitness devotee, are you not?
Well, I try the best I can. I've been in training for 40 years and never got in shape, you know, but I hope to do better. But in any event, I must say that I've listened to some of the commentaries about his achievements, but I think the great tragedy in the loss of Mayor Washington is not so much some of the achievements that he left behind, because I think most of what he had done so far was merely prologue. The first 4 years was you know, getting his bearings, and
A lot of battles.
then he got the control of the council, and now he was the captain of the ship.
Now, Alderman Paczynski, I want to get, because we're running out of time, I know that you were battling the mayor on certain things, but what did you make of the man overall as a man?
Our budget director knows that, yes, we had differences, especially on taxes, but the fact remains that you could argue with Harold Washington, you could debate with him, he would put his best foot forward, but he never became disagreeable. He was always a gentleman. No matter how strong he opposed your particular view or how strong you opposed his view, the fact is that when he dealt with you as a very gentle person. And he was a dynamic leader. I think his legacy will be as deep concern for the neighborhoods of Chicago. We paved more streets and fixed more curbs and fixed more sidewalks in our ward this last year than ever before. He was committed to rebuilding the city's neighborhoods. And he loved it. I think he took a great liking to this job. I don't think he liked this job very much when he was first elected. But then he took a liking to it. Now he loves it. Oh, now he loved it. He loved the job. He loved the people he dealt with.
Wouldn't take a holiday?
No. So it's going to be very difficult to find a dynamic leader like him to replace him. I think that the fine candidates who are now in the city council, and one of them must be plucked for the job, they all are more along the Kennelly line. But not the dynamic, forceful leaders that Harold Washington was. He'll be a tough, tough act to follow.
And Ms. Gilliam, I just want to go back to you for a minute. You mentioned his focusing on fairness always, but what was he like to work with?
I found him to be an excellent person to work with and to work for. He was intelligent, which is absolutely necessary as complex as city government is, as complex as this big business is. He was like former Mayor Bolandic there, whom I also work for. He was truly saw people for their potential as people. It did not matter that you were a woman. It did not matter whether you were black or white. If he saw a skilled individual who he felt could do the job, he would promote you. He would give you the opportunity to do that job.
Did he know how to call you on the carpet? I don't mean you personally, but could he do that?
Oh, he certainly could do that. Thank goodness. I never was subjected to that, but I heard about other people who would. And finally, I think the women of this city owe him a tremendous debt in the number of us that have been promoted into and gotten traditionally male-occupied jobs and have the opportunity to show this city and the whole country that jobs are not gender-specific.
I want to go back to Bruce in a minute, but I just want Mayor Bolandic to comment briefly on what you now want to say. I mean, we're going through both a period of mourning here, and quite frankly, in this city, you know, there's also behind-the-scenes politicking going on, but what do you want to see happen in the next months?
Well, I think that, as I was telling you before, the great tragedy is the fact that he was just getting poised. Everything was in place.
Whether you agreed with him or not, he was getting ready to do his thing,
the
right?
The buck was going to stop at his desk before they could say, well, it's the council's fault, it's somebody else's fault. He had the tools to do the job. He had the will to do the job. He had the desire to do the job. And when he moved in to the political arena by taking the walk across the street to the Central Committee, he was now putting the political chess piece in place, and now it was all systems go. And it was like the opening of a show. The curtain opened and the star doesn't show up.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because Roman Paczynski, when he made that walk across the street to consolidate the political power, I mean, didn't you think of Richard J. Daley also?
I think that his legacy is that he did bring us together. Before he died, he did bring us together. We have never been together as much in the last 4 or 5 years. We have been now.
That slate said it, didn't it? I mean, your daughter is an example on the...
Just one of the examples.
Just one of them.
He wanted to have a ethnically balanced slate, which is ethnic politics in Chicago for 50 years. And there's no question, had he lived, I think his second term would have been an enormous success. Would you agree with that?
I certainly agree. I think the first term was an enormous success, given
the
circumstances that had to be overcome.
Sure.
Bruce Dumont has a new guest at our downtown offices. Bruce?
Yes, John. He is the alderman and the committeeman of the 22nd Ward, Jesus Garcia, a rookie member of the Chicago City Council, but one of the loyal members of the Washington bloc. And as the long-term interim mayor of the city is going to be determined, the Hispanic bloc takes on great significance. What are your thoughts on your role in deciding who the interim mayor will be?
Well, first again, I think we want to express our deep sense of loss of undoubtedly a great leader who played an instrumental part in our election to the City Council. The importance of and the prominence of the Hispanic community in the city of Chicago, in the county of Cook, and I think even in national politics. I think we want to make sure that we pay our due respects to a great leader who has just gained national and international attention for what he's done for so many people throughout this great city.
Acknowledging that, Alderman Garcia, would you also acknowledge that the influence of the Hispanic political leaders, the four in the City Council, has never been greater than it is at this moment in history?
Yes, I would, and I think it's a tribute to Mayor Harold Washington and the work that he carried out, because he wanted to see that. With respect to what happens now, I think that we will try to ensure, and we've already had preliminary discussions, that whoever is going to succeed Harold Washington, we would like to see an attempt to emulate the policies of Harold Washington, the fairness, the justice, and certainly the dynamics which characterize his administration, because we've made very, very significant gains under his administration, and we want to pay tribute to that.
I would like to ask Alderman Puchinsky a question, and that is, you have been in this situation before where those who are left behind try to move in and take over, not only get a piece of the pie, but in many cases get as much of the pie as possible. What's going on right now, tonight, with those leaders of the Chicago City Council? And will you acknowledge that there are political calls being made tonight to line up the 26 votes needed to be the interim mayor of Chicago?
I'm not aware of such phone calls. I am aware that there's discussions going on, but I think we feel very strongly that out of respect to the mayor, we ought to go through the mourning period. We ought to have the services, the memorial service, and then we start talking about who would be a good successor. I don't think there's very much discussion going on right now, though.
Would you acknowledge, earlier I mentioned that the three names that are most obvious would be Alderman Tim Evans, Alderman Eugene Sawyer, and Alderman Richard Mell. Is there anyone that you would delete from that list or add to that list?
Well, there's a number of people that could be added to the list. I don't think it'd be limited to those three, although all three are very exceptional people.
Could be anyone of 50.
Could be anyone of 50.
Get them off the hook.
Sure.
Ms. Gilliam, Alderman Puchinsky, and Mr. Balandic, thank you all very much. And Bruce Dumont, thank you. And for persons who might want to see the various testimonies to the mayor on this program, it'll be repeated at midnight. If you saw or heard the doctors and paramedics being interviewed after the announcement of the mayor's death, you saw that they were most professional and concise in their descriptions of what they tried to do to save the mayor. They had to act now and grieve or feel later. And so it is with news people. Your anchor people and field reporters for the commercial stations worked through the day reporting and interviewing and interpreting events and apologizing as they went for having to bring up any discussion of the political power aspects of the story. And I can tell you that I think Harold Washington was enough of a politician to forgive us all for that part of our reporting. He had it in him to forgive, even though his memory was not short. He was a delight to cover. He loved being mayor, and he was really a miracle man. Who would have ever thought that this man who had run afoul of the tax laws and served time could become mayor of Chicago? Who among his fondest friends and supporters, even 5 years before he came mayor, 2 years before, would ever dream that a black man could be known as His Honor, Harold in Chicago? He was, for those of us in the media, and thus those of you who watch and read, a very, very accessible